Welcome in, everybody, to the Farmers Insurance Open Breakdown 2025. Getting early lock this week, so we kept the same time for the show Tuesday night. We'll be back kind of to normal next week in terms of having a full day to take this in, but we're going to have full content with ranking scores and everything up for this week. Really excited. I mentioned this week a couple times on previous shows with Chris. He wasn't able to make it this week, just a scheduling conflict, but we'll get back together going forward. But I've mentioned this week at Torrey Pines a couple times that I'm really excited for it. Always love this event, kind of as the kickoff to the year. So that's what we get here, and haven't been able to follow the news super close, but I was hearing some rumblings that we might come back here in place of Riviera here in a couple weeks. Somebody in the chat might know if that is more of a sure thing than me. Let me see if I can find that actually. Yeah, I don't think that's official, but I was hearing that as a rumbling as to, we might come back to the South Course here. So that would be interesting to come back here again here in a few weeks for a signature event. We've seen this course a lot of times. We'll just jump right in. Same format as Chris and I have been doing. We'll go through the course, some key stats, some things that we're looking for, and then we'll start looking at some builds, and then that'll kind of feed into talking about the players. So where we're going to start here in terms of stats, I mean, this is my notes just say basically this is a big boy course. I mean, you think of some of the others on tour, Quail Hollow, Riviera, Muirfield, Bay Hill. Some of those are the ones that comp to the South Course in terms of the play styles that fit well there. So you're going to need driving distance is something I'm looking at this week. Everybody's going to be missing fairways, tight fairways. The distance is going to help you have shorter clubs in slightly from the rough if you're there. Basically, long iron fest here. You're going to need your long irons to play well. Like to see that people play well in California because a lot of these greens being POA kind of cross over between one another. So that's something that I'm looking at as well. It's just a difficult course. It's not one that you're going to see a 25 under winner. If we pull up the sheet and look at the course history, you had Pavon last year at 13, Homa the year before at 13, List at 15, Patrick Reed at 14. Just a kind of a spattering of that 10 to 15 range. And I think that's what we'll see again here this week. Seems to be pretty dry there. So definitely expecting something similar here this week, and we can target some of these players that we've got here. So we will have some input from Chris here because some of these highlights, or all these highlights, are his, and the model that he's put in here is his as well. So we are going to have some input. So just kind of, again, capping off the stats, driving distance, long irons, 200 plus yards is a pretty big one this week compared to the average of what we're looking at over the course of the season. Long courses, ball strikers is what we're looking for here. Not to say putters, short iron, shorter hitters can't get there. I mean, you're going to have that from time to time every week at courses like this where some of those guys just get hot with the putter, get hot around the green, and really stick in a week like this. But for the most part, I'm looking at ball strikers rather than and longer hitters compared to the shorter, plotters around here. So hopping right in, we'll go over to the builder. I've not done any builds yet this week. Of course, getting familiar with the field and some of the changes. There was one change I wanted to see. I just seen one posted a bit ago that I wanted to make sure wasn't something pretty drastic. Burgoon out, Martin Laird in. Okay. That was one that we laughed about last week because I used to play Burgoon like all the time. So don't have to worry about that this week, as Laird will be in for him. But looking at the top of the board and where we want to start with builds, you've got what looks to be a pretty popular Oberg, Hideki, Finau, and M round out the 10K range. We don't have anybody above 10K or above the 10K group, so nobody 11K or more. Oberg starts at 10.8. Pretty interesting group. All those rate out really well. I mean, you think of Oberg, he's kind of the prototype to what you would want here. But it does seem like he's going to get a pretty drastically higher number in terms of ownership than the rest of this range, like probably 10% more. So, again, like we've been saying, if you love him this week, definitely don't be scared to play him. 10% is 10%. You can get different in other ways. But I think there is a big enough gap to have the conversation of Sung Jae's 10K, $800 discount if you need it, and probably a 10 to 15% less ownership. Hideki's probably within 5 of Oberg. So, again, I would just pick, who you like the most there. Of course, Hideki's in pretty good form, coming off the win a couple weeks ago. Solid form here as well. He's had some solid finishes. Oberg was 9th here a year ago. Finau's had good track record here. He worries me a little bit with, kind of the talk a couple weeks ago about potential injury, and we haven't gotten much clarity on that. He didn't look great in that outing. Sung Jae was also not very good in his last outing. So, it's one of those things that you got to pick one of the two. You're either picking the ownership discount and just hoping that they were just getting into the swing of things, like Chris and I have talked about a couple times to start the year, in terms of taking some chances on guys that, may just be shaking off the rust to start the year. Or are you going to jump in on somebody who we've seen the form, won at Century in Hideki, 16th at Sony. We had Oberg finish 5th at the Century and finished off the fall pretty well too. So both of those guys in solid form, whereas Sung Jae, was good at the Century and then missed the cut at the Amex, which is a volatile event with the course rotation. So I might give him a pass for that. And then if you look at the other option there in Tony Finau, coming off the miscut after a 15th at the Century, so not good results overall for him. 15th is decent, but shorter field doesn't feel as great. But in terms of where we're starting and how we're looking at builds, I think this group is probably where you want to start. I mean, you could definitely pepper a couple of those 9K guys, and there's some in there that I like Jason Day seems to be playing really solid right now. He's had a very good track record here, 1 in 15 and 18, third last week. You've got Shane Lowry, who I always tend to play, and he's been playing really well on the DP World Tour. Keegan, just another one of the prototypical guys that should play well here, and he has played well here. Long iron player. I think he's a very interesting play. Interested to see what his ownership will come in at. I think it'll be somewhere in the 12 to 15 range. And I think that's a really interesting play when you've got other guys in the nines like Grazerman, Willie Z, Sahith, that are all going to be kind of right there too. I think Keegan is form-wise one of the top few in that range, and if you can get him at a slight ownership discount, I like that. Grazerman worries me a little bit, coming here in a little bit of a stronger field, tougher golf course, and he's going to be pretty popular. Almost 10K is kind of wild to see, but he is playing really good golf. Willie Z, love the course for him. Love him this week, along with Jason Day. And then Shane Lowry, like I said, I think he might come in slightly lower just because people haven't seen him much this year. So, let's take a look at the last time he was on. Yeah, he hasn't played since the playoffs on the PGA Tour. But if you look at his DP World Tour stats, let me get those pulled up here. If you think of him, he's definitely the ball striker who can he just make a few putts. And if you look at since he went over after the playoffs, 12th, 13th, 12th, 13th, 3rd through the fall there over on the DP World Tour. So I really like him this week at only 9K. I think you can play the preferred build for me is probably going to be 110 and 19. But I could see getting a little different with going, maybe a couple 9s and then just being a little more balanced out this week. So let's throw in, a couple up here at the top as to where we want to start. So let's do one of the, I think the 3 9K is going to be one that doesn't get a lot of play, and I want to see how it kind of flows together. So let's just do Keegan, Lowry, Willie Z. So you're giving up maybe a little bit of win equity at the top, but not a ton. I mean, it's not a big drop off into these 9s, and you get a drastically lower ownership number as a whole when you don't include Ludwig or Hideki. And even Finau and M, for that matter, might be a little higher than the 9K range as well. So just a little more spread out in the 9s. So getting Lowry, Keegan, and Willie Z, and then we can kind of go from there. And we don't really have to worry about ownership in this case. Now, we're going to have to drop down into the 6s, low 7s, and get some guys. But I think you can definitely find some plays down there this week. If you look at, we'll go ahead and skip down there. So in the low 7s, and again, you're going to only find something I always stress in fields like this, courses like this. When you get down into this range, these guys aren't going to fit every stat you're looking at. Like we talked about, Ludwig's kind of the prototype golfer you would want here. These guys might have 1 or 2 things about them, like driving distance is all that looks good, or long irons is what looks good, but they can't, find their way off the tee. But that's just the way it is. I mean, these guys are priced down here for a reason. So down here in the bottom, you've got guys like Vegas, maybe a bounce back here. I think that's interesting. Thor Bjornsson, I think he has very big upside in this range at 7,400. Gary Woodland, I think he's looked solid to start the year. Sam Stevens was a guy when I was running some things last night on some sims and stuff who was just kind of popping, which was interesting. Form's not great, but he was 13th in 23, 7,300. Maybe can take a shot on him. He rates out really well for a course fit here. He off the tee, he's 8th. Driving distance is solid. Just kind of overall, he rates out in our stat model is 29th. A guy who rates out number 1 in our stat model is actually Vegas, who I mentioned briefly there at 74. Of course, he's coming off a 91st. He's always a volatile guy, right? But if you look at, the upside that I think he possesses, you've got the miscut last week, but before he was fourth and just smoked his irons at the Century. So I like him for a little flop lag this week. Continuing on, let's see. Harris English is one of those guys that would need to find a putter. Frankie Sappin, how did he finish up last week? Because he was looking really good, and I think he's the type of longer hitter that I think we could play this week. 12th last week. Just a solid overall start to the year. I don't know. Does he have any experience here? No. Yeah, he just really seemed to be playing well last week. We haven't got our stats updated to 2025 yet because of such small sample size. So guys like him are not feeding in. But let me just take a look. I can take a look at his over the last couple weeks and kind of look at where he stands for 2025, or mainly how did he play last week. Of course, there's only a couple rounds even last week. But in the 2 rounds at the stadium course, he was actually negative for those 2 on approach. Let's see, driving. Let me touch on a couple guys' driving distance for 2025 here so far that we could get behind. Gary Woodland's pumping it out there this year so far in the measured drives that he's got. Let's see here. Frankie Sappin doesn't actually rate out very good in that either, so maybe not. But I do like his upside. I like how he played last week. Kevin Yu, 6th here last year, and if you think about it, he's one of those guys that just can't putt. Great ball striker, just can't putt. So I think he makes sense. Chris is on him there. Lee Hodges is a guy Chris likes. Not good history here, but very solid form. I talked about him some last week. Nicholas Norgard, I've heard a lot of talk about him. Those are usually guys that I like to take a wait and see on, especially if they're going to be popular. So depending on the ownership, I don't usually like to take shots on people like that. And if you look, he's probably going to get some steam, I would say. Probably going to get close to 10%. Chris has him as a tournament option. Definitely think you could do it. Justin Rose is a guy that fits this place really well. Good history here. Won in 2019. Let me see where his current form is coming from. Yeah, that form's from late last year, but I think he definitely fits the type of course that we're playing here, as you've seen in history. And he kind of comes together at big boy courses. He might, not look so great for a long time, and then he'll just pop like he's done at the Masters in the past and so on. So I think he's in play. Jaeger is a guy that fits the brand, right? But coming off a third here a year ago as well. So definitely like him down there. Trying to peek through. Just need a couple of these cheap guys to feed in and Bramlett could be a guy. Lanto Griffin, he kind of seems to be one of those guys, right? That would fit this type of place, and he's played well here. Because I think he started really poor. Yeah, he missed cut at the Sony, but then he did bounce back with a 34th last week. So something to look at. For Lanto, I think that's in play. Bramlett's odds for where he's priced look really, really good. Doesn't look like he's played this year yet. Yeah, hasn't played on PGA Tour since the RSM. But man, yeah, he does fit this course from a stat perspective. Bomber guy who will pump it out there, and we've seen the history here. So rates out number 2 in the DK value ranking, which is looks at the odds versus DK price, 110 to 1 at this price tag. So I like him. Who's another guy? Sam Ryder actually rates out really well on that. I think a lot of that, he pops up quite often in that stat. Who's number 1? Number 1 is Ryan Palmer. That's pretty sickening. Great history here. Where has he played? This is not somebody I'm going to be playing this week, but 34th last week. I don't think I can do that. So let's pick a couple plays down here that we talked about and kind of hop in and throw some of those builds in there. So Thorbjorn, I think we had 7,200 left at our current build. So it just kind of depends on what you want to get back up to. We just kind of talked through the bottom of that range. Let's throw in a Bramlett and kind of go from there. And this is, again, more for tournaments, 7,350. So then if you play like Lee Hodges, you're going to be getting back into that top 7s range where you could play Jaeger, who I really like, Aaron Rye, back up to the 8. You'd have to drop into the 6s, but that's a guy that Chris likes quite a bit. Luke Clanton's got to be also one of those flop lag guys at 8,500. I wonder what his ownership will be after he got burned, or he burned people, including us. People will probably go back, but man, I think he fits his plays. Long iron guy, hit his irons really well over a lot of his starts. So I think Clanton at 85 is a place I want to go back to. But yeah, he probably isn't going to get the ownership discount this week, which is unfortunate. Eckroat seems to me like he would be kind of a fit for here. Ball striker guy. Daniel Berger, I think he's in play if you get back up into the 7s. Meissner, I don't love the fit for Meissner this week. Doug Gim, yeah, I think he's a fit ball striker in this range. Yeah, Gim rates out pretty well for us, 13th a year ago. So let's just throw Jaeger. You got 69 again, so you would have to drop back down into that range and play like a Lanto or something like that. If you don't play, so let's just do a little bit different build. You can kind of see where that one ends up, into the low 7s. So we got the 3 9s in that build. Now let's go back to the top and let's do a Ludwig team and kind of talk through what we need to do to get our ownership different as we build out the rest of our team if you're going to play him. And like I said, I definitely think you can. I'm never opposed to playing people at ownership if I like them as a fit, and I do. So I'm a little torn on if he would make like single entry for me, just maybe because there is going to be even more leverage on somebody like him in those types of contests, but we'll see. Definitely we'll be mixing him in multi-entry. So how do we get different? You look into the mid-8s. Everybody's kind of in the same range in terms of ownership. What about our boy Vegas? Is he getting much of a look this week? Yeah, under 10 for sure. Let's see here. What about Kevin Yu? What is he getting? Yeah, so let's do a little U Vegas team. So this is definitely more for tournaments, U in Vegas. So now we've got 82-33 left for the 3 spots. So we can get back up into the mids. We can play another 7s and then get a couple 8s like Pendrith, who Chris has. Maybe we can get back up to Lowry. I think that would be an interesting build. You kind of get Ludwig, who's going to be the most popular at 9K and above, and then you get maybe the lowest owned guy in that range in Shane Lowry in the bottom of the pricing. So then you got 78.50 left for a couple spots, and you can kind of do what you want. You can go back up, play like a Rye. I think that makes sense. You can play Clanton, like we kind of talked about. So let's throw Clanton in there, and that leaves us 72. Leaves us dead on Gary Woodland, Michael Kim. Michael Kim has ties to this place growing up. A lot of rounds played here. He rates out really well in our stat fit model. Has always kind of had middling results here. But I think he's definitely in play this week for value. I wonder what his ownership is coming in at. Looking around 5 to 7%. I'm looking at a couple places. Yeah, 5 to 7. It's what we're probably looking at for him. If you look at his recent form, 43rd last week, miscut at the Sony. But in the fall, he had some really solid results. 5th, 30th, 12th, 11th. So maybe just shaking the rust off. Now he comes to a comfy place. I think he could pop for sure. Ownership, no, I won't have that on the cheat sheet. So I'm looking at a couple different places around the industry. Ship It Nation, who we had a partnership with, or have a partnership with currently. And then I also look at Inside Sports Network. They have some pretty good ownership as well with Andy Lack there. But no, we won't be pulling those into the sheet. All right. So that's kind of I really like that build. You get a little different. You still play at Oberg, but you get different in that range. And then you can pepper, some of those lower owned guys like, that are under 10%. And the construction just seems to me to be a little different when you put in Lowry as your second guy in there with Oberg. So really like that. We'll do one more, and then we'll probably get out of here. So the other build that I could see, I don't love the 8s this week. I like the 9s a lot better. So like I could see kind of like what we did earlier where we completely skipped the 8s, where we played 3 9s. But even if you weren't playing 3 9s, if you were just playing 2, like say you were playing, let's try to see if we can get an Oberg Hideki team. That leaves us 71-25. Might be a little too thin because there's not a ton of value options that we love this week. Yeah. Nick Hardy's another guy, kind of like Michael Kim, who has ties to Torrey. let's take a look at his form. He was a couple made cuts, but man, he looks horrible. Current form, missed cut last 2 weeks, last 4 events on the PGA Tour. Man, that's tough. With the form, I mentioned last week that I lean much more towards form than course history when it comes to people like that. So I just don't know that I can do that. Let's see here. You would really need somebody in that 6s range. Hayden Springer rates out decent. He's had some decent form. So he looks like he has not played since the fall. And he had 3 straight made cuts. 33rd here a year ago. Nate Lashley was 3rd. Same with Jake Knapp. It was kind of his run last year right around this time. But Lashley wouldn't be a horrible play if you wanted to dip down in there. Matty Schmid, I think he maybe could bounce back. Manacero's a ball striker when he's on, but he can definitely be off. How's he looking? Because I've seen his name. He was 40 last week. He was 43rd last week. I mean, he fits this course, Manacero. And when he was playing there, I think we even played him at the Open Championship last year when he came 31st. After a really good ball striking week at the Scottish. So maybe he's a guy that we could go to. What's his history here? He's not played the Farmers. He might have played the U.S. Open, one of the U.S. Opens here, but hasn't played the Farmers. So he'd be kind of a risky tournament play down in here. I don't know that I will get to the double stud build there. I think you got to give up too much to get that. But where I was kind of going with that is if you can live, instead of skip or playing the 8s, if you could skip that range as a whole and play only 2 above 9K, but still skip the 8s and just pepper the 7s, you can get a lot of those upper 7s guys. So I'll kind of show that. You can probably get Sung Jae in a build like that. That looks 73. And then if you play any of those guys like we talked about, let's just throw Lee Hodges in there in this scenario, get you to 74. Then you play it anybody else down in this range. Michael Kim, let's just go to him, 75 now for the last 2. So you can definitely get some solid value options in there. Doug Gim, Eckroat. My preferred build in this would be probably, if you were going to do this exact thing, is let's just do Keegan would be a good second guy. Like Willie Z gives you 77.50 for these last 2 spots. And then you can, most people probably aren't playing 2 upper 7s, I wouldn't think. If you look at ownership in that upper 7s range, they're all, 7 to 10. I just don't see people landing in that because they're going to get into the 8s that has some ownership or have to go lower as a whole. So if you land yourself in that range, you can kind of play like a Jaeger and Doug Gim, or Jaeger and Berger, or Hubbard, or JJ Spawn. I think's decent. He's been horrible here the last couple of years, but he was better here when he came onto the scene, and he's looked good the last couple of weeks. So like a Gim Jaeger, Gim Eckroat type to finish off that build, I think makes a lot of sense. All right. Yeah, that'll do it for me. So again, kind of where I'm looking is I think Oberg makes a ton of sense, even though he's going to be owned. But if you're playing him, you need to get your construction different. It's not so much about just finding, a 1% on guy that nobody's playing. It's get your construction different with him. Maybe getting a slightly lower on like a Lowry or something like that. Or, maybe you go heavy on a group of guys like in the upper sevens. Maybe you play 3 in the upper sevens where people are playing max 2 usually. Maybe even just 1 in that range, depending on how many they play above. Just get a little bit different in the way you set the team up as opposed to, just playing the same type of setup where you play one Oberg, then you play one in the 9s, and then you play one in the 8s, and then you got a low 7s, a couple of those, and then you got one upper 7s. It's probably going to be a really popular setup there. And then when you're talking about the players that's going to be, you're probably looking at what's going to be the most popular starting point. Might actually be that Ludwig Zally team. That might be one of the most popular starting spots. Or maybe people are going to try the Ludwig Sungjae start. Yeah. Nobody's really. Pendrith looks pretty popular, the most popular in the 7s or in the 8s. So, he's in the upper part of that range. So definitely could see people going like what would that team do if you had said I was getting out of here. Now I'm going back to talking. If you have what this could be one of the more popular starts, no, probably not. I think that puts you too thin. Those are the 3 highest guys in what I'm looking at above in each range. But if you play all 3 of them together, it puts you at 69. So people could definitely do it. But I don't know that that'll be the most popular 3-man start. Yeah. So I'll have my rankings up here in just a bit. Really wish we could have, every year they're going to do this now, it seems, with the Sunday championship games for NFL. Just kind of avoid that. Start on Wednesday, which I'm fine with. Makes sense. We can enjoy Sunday for NFL. But like I said, we'll be back normal next week on Tuesday again, but having an extra day for prep. Next week, they go to Pebble Beach. Fun week. Another course rotation week. Always love to get done with those. These are never my favorite ones between, this week. You've got the North course that's much easier than what I was talking about stat-wise for the South course. And everybody's going to have one round, which just makes the cut line the first couple days is just much more variable. You're going to have people who smoke the North course 6 under, let's just say, and then they come out and shoot 4 over on the South and miss the cut. I mean, you're going to have that this week. So a ton of variance on these weeks with the course rotations. So I'll be glad when we get out of that after, I guess it's after next week. Is that the last one? Yeah, because then they go to Phoenix. And then the Genesis, which, like I said, may be right back here on one course, which would be nice. We'll see. And then they go to Mexico, PGA National, and as they start the Florida swing. So no more course rotations after next week. Excited for that. But Torrey's always fun. So let's have a good week here this week. Good luck to everybody. I'll have rankings and cores up tonight. Plenty of time to build for tomorrow morning, depending on where you're at. We have, I think, around a lunchtime start here on the East Coast. So, yeah, when is lock? Clock is 11:50 Eastern. But I'll plan to get those up here in just a bit. Good luck to everybody this week, and we'll see you next week for